Welcome and good evening, you wonderful dice of all alignments. I am Lunar D. This is the unrehearsed creepypasta narrations, part 34. I already have my phone pulled up on creepypasta.com, and there is actually a link here that is going to a random story. There's a little pumpkin next to it. It's in the menu where it says home, top ranked, famous creepypasta story, submissions, and then random story. We're going to click on random story, and I don't know if let's try to click it again. Okay, so he's trying to load, and we wait. This is an advertisement thing here. Let's close this, maybe it'll load faster. Okay, so the story we got is In the Mist, posted November 29th, 2013. It was posted by who posted the story? It's got a rating of 8.81 out of 10, 407 votes. So the name, like it says Randomrooroo. I don't know if that's the name or just a silly thing they put because I clicked random. So I'm not sure who posted this. Maybe it'll say at the end. Estimated reading time 12 minutes. Scotland is one of those places that seems to never really be simple, or summed up neatly into a couple of words. Sure, you can try. The tourists certainly do. Tartan, booze, and heavy accents. But I've lived here all my life. Never worn tartan nor drunk, although I suppose my accent is fairly thick. In reality, it's like most places in the world are nowadays. A strange mix of tradition and striving to be ahead in the modern world. But one thing that truly seems to persist with the country is fear. The fear of the countryside, the hills and the cliffs, strong currents of the sea, the knowledge that the world out there is a dangerous place. Fear followed us into the towns as well, one of the simplest forms of merely being stabbed by one of the notorious gangs on the East Coast. But after my experiences growing up, I would say the fear of the countryside persists the most. The old world full of magic and ghouls, so easy to laugh about when sitting at home, but out there on the moors, it's the type of place where you can start to believe those old stories. I grew up in the countryside, one of those tucked away houses in the highlands, which in order to get to one, you needed to take the most underused roads. Possible before turning down a practically hidden track, winding deeper into the unkempt forests. In a lot of ways, it was a pretty darn good place to grow up in. There was little traffic, so my parents had little to worry over the usual city problems. Plenty of room to keep animals of all sorts, and a vast playground stretching out for miles. There were a few downsides, of course. A long journey to school and back each day, even longer once I moved up to secondary. A pretty crap internet connection, once we finally got it, and a temperamental source of electricity. We got good at playing board games during the power cuts. The one thing that I loved about our house was the location. Near the base of a steep hill, my parents were enthusiastic hill walkers, and although when I was little I'd complain about being dragged along, I soon caught the bug for it. All we had to do for a great walk was take the pathway to the back of our house, heading uphill. Just follow it along. Soon enough, the trees would clear, and you'd be left with a pretty fantastic view of the landscape. It was also the type of hill close to several others on one side, the types that all appear to melt into each other and loom dauntingly, bordering the view from the car window on the long stretch of road heading toward Iverness. And boy, if you love walking, you'd adore these hills. Of course, my parents were always cautious when I was little. It was definitely the type of place you wouldn't want a small child wandering about by themselves. But once I got older, I was allowed to go out by myself, promising to stick to the designated path and not go too far. Kids never really do listen to their parents, do they? Of course, as I grew older, my parents became much more lax about the rules and trusted that I was able to look after myself fairly well on my own. And generally I had good experiences up the hillside. I found what I can only describe as the glory of walking. The feel of being completely isolated and at one with nature, the vastness of everything, the knowledge that the path I was walking had been one the people many generations ago were taking. But I suppose this story is about the bad experiences I had with them. As beautiful as the landscape was, there was another thing about Scotland. The weather is as unpredictable as our tempers. There was once, when I was about 9 years old, I'd grown bored of watching television and decided to head out for a walk, taking one of three dogs along with me. Penny, a border collie, and wandered up along the hillside. I was heading towards a pile of rocks which I nicknamed Stonehenge. It was in reality most likely an old con that had been knocked over and its stones haphazardly scattered. It was a bit off the beaten path, but not too far away from the safety zone. I enjoyed going up there to play about being a Neanderthal, a toolmong girl. Details I can't remember. What I do, I remember is how I was so caught up in my imaginings and play that I didn't realize the weather had taken a turn for the worse, and that a thin veil of mist had set in that was growing steadily thicker and thicker. I noticed this, and even though I started to feel unsure, I could still see the pathway so shrugged and carried on playing. The next thing that I knew was a loud bark from Penny, who I turned to face to see what she'd gotten worked up about. But as I turned, I saw her speeding towards me, her teeth bared. When a dog comes running towards you as though it's about to attack, it's a pretty frightening thing, especially when you're young. I was frozen, still trying to figure out where I should run, and Penny had already jumped on top of me, toppling me over. I fell into the gap between two of the largest stones. Thankfully, I didn't crack my head open on a rock. The tumble was so scary, enough I nearly curled up, thinking and convinced that my dog had turned against me and would tear me to shreds. She hovered above me, her teeth inches from my neck, and instead of reaching down, she continued to snarl at something that wasn't me. She barked. I felt her weight lift from me as she moved off me, furious at something that I couldn't see between my fingers. I stayed very still. I don't know how long, but it felt like an eternity. Finally, she stopped appearing as though she was about to attack and retreated back to me, tending to my face.
carried as much bravery as I could muster. I got up on my knees, before she nudged me away from where she had taken a stance. I stood up and moved towards the path. My hands still close to my side, still not at ease. She relaxed a little and I could trod the path, but as I stumbled back along towards home, quickly my legs still rushed to her side as I took each step. I had a bit of explaining to do to my parents when I came there. They were all used to me getting a bit dirtied and scratched when I played in the forest. I mentioned how defensive Penny had gotten, and we all ended up brushing it off, thinking maybe it had been a stray sheep that she had growling at. The second experience I had was a fair few years later, when I was 15 years old. It was an age in which I promised my least amount of time outside on walks. As I got caught up in the world of the internet, I was able to communicate with my friends relatively cheaply at home, something which I was greatly excited by, and I had gotten increasingly angry, taking my frustrations out by yelling at my parents about how horrific it was to be so isolated, and in a typical teenage manner, stormed out of the house, knowing that they'd be likely to follow me on the road towards civilization. I headed in the opposite direction and took myself up the hill side. Slowly my frustration diminished as I worked out my anger through my physical exercise, and I found myself almost smiling at the view I had not seen in some months, having forgotten how glorious walking was. Instead of going back home in a much more reasonable mood, I decided to enjoy the countryside that afternoon and started wandering the hillside. By that age, I knew the whole area better than most people in their hometown could have figured my way back home in a million life. I hiked up to the summits of the hill, before dipping down and up again to the next summit. As I looked out, I could see the weather was taking a turn for the worst again, and headed off back home. As I wandered, a strange combination of mist, clouds running in front of itself, the sun, and laughing down the hillside. It was just a moment I started to feel odd. There was this strange sensation of hard cliche, ice, unusually strong and unsure. for a bit dim, getting lost in the river, and not sticking to the paths. At that moment, I genuinely believed that I wasn't going to get home. Broke down and ran. It didn't really matter that tears were obscuring my vision, or the misty clouds growing thicker, or that I had no idea where I was running. I just ran as far as I could. I wasn't going to be someone who would curl up into a little ball and freeze to death. And for some reason I just hoped, as long as I ran down for long enough, I'd reach some form of civilization again. But that depended entirely on which hill I was on. I stumbled along, trying hard not to fall. Though I'm not sure where I twisted my ankle by plowing through the uneven terrain until I fell down. I screamed, a true, completely uncontrollable scream. As I fell to the ground hard, I banged my face. Something hard. I cried out in agony. I felt my face and cringed to find a warm, sticky substance in my face. I wiped it away as best as I could and squinted, hard to see what I'd fallen on. I'd almost crying with joy when I realized that I must have tripped over one of the rogue rocks of Stonehenge. It was a relief to know that I was at a well-visited landmark of mine, and had the instructions of how to get home from here carved into my mind, although it was a bit pathetic to admit this. I crawled to the path and cried with relief when I reached it. I continued crawling for a good part of the way, just too scared to get up and see the world closed off around me, with the mist pressing in from all sides. I eventually managed to stand up again once I reached the muddier path of the forest. My parents were worried sick when I got back in, and quickly drove me to the hospital. My wounds weren't too bad, but I had lost a lot of blood, as the cut was to my head, and had got stitched up. I shakily managed to tell my parents that I just panicked and ending up running and tripped. I could easily be chalked up to nerves and the fact that I hadn't been walking up there for months. But I felt in my heart it was something deeper than that. There had been an instinctive part of me that felt wrong, and though I wouldn't dare admit it to anyone, I admit I hadn't been alone on that hill. It hadn't just been bad weather. It had been the strange sort of mist that had either fogged my brain or had been trying to draw me into it. After that incident, I wouldn't go walking up the hill by myself, and always made sure I at least brought a dog along. I was simply too shaken up, but too, it didn't completely deter me from enjoying the splendors of the hill. The final time I went walking in the hills was about a year ago, after the last incident, when I was 16. I was starting to feel a lot better about what had happened. I began to rationalize it in my head. One of the closer friends had come over for a weekend, and we had spent the first night staying up late, stuffing our faces and munching away on whatever food we could find in the cupboard. The next day, though, our entertainment was wearing thin, and we decided to go out and about a bit. Unfortunately, having woken up late, we missed a ride in the closest village with my mum, and instead of taking the trek down to the bus stop, we decided to just do a walk nearby and set up on the hill. We laughed and jested, and I showed my friend Leslie the place where I'd cracked my head open, as well as the cairn on the top of the hill, and we spent a good couple of hours simply wandering slowly around the hillsides. Again, we lost track of time a bit, and it was starting to get late, so we just started to head back home. A mist had settled in where the whole place felt as it had been when I was 15.
A bit disoriented, however, I took deep breaths, controlling my emotions, and continued in a calm manner. After a while, Leslie started to worry a bit aloud. Are you sure we're headed in the right direction? Yes, I replied confidently, trying to keep my voice assured. There was a pause as we walked in silence for 5 minutes. How come it's taking so long? Leslie moaned. Are you sure you know where we are? I nodded. How can you even tell him this? My friend gestured around at the white landscape. I didn't really know how to answer that. I was just using my gut instinct. I could have pointed out a couple of rock shapes that we passed that I knew well, but I doubt it would have seemed very convincing. Leslie knew that I'd gotten lost here once, and evidently that was casting doubt on the accuracy of my judgment. I looked around and realized for the first time how blindingly white it all seemed in the mist. It was then that I saw something else in the mist. Glancing back at Leslie, I saw that my companion had seen the figure too. It was hard to properly see, but it definitely looked like someone else had gotten caught in ridiculous weather as well. Some poor bugger was stumbling around, looking lost. I sighed. I was just about to say I was going to go fetch them and take them back with us when Leslie spoke. Look, why don't we ask them for directions? I choked back a laugh. Somehow I don't think they're going to be the best help. It's probably some tourist. She looked at me incredulously. What are you talking about? They look a damn lot more sure of themselves than we do. I glanced back at the figure, which appeared to have fallen down, confused. Look, come on, before he goes, Leslie started off toward the figure. No, I grabbed her arm. What? I spoke in an urgent whisper. The thing over there, it's standing up. Leslie looked at it before turning back and rolling her eyes. Yes, I looked over. The figure was most definitely on the ground, fumbling around. We should go. Now. What? Shh. I lowered my voice. I stepped back slowly. Oh, for Christ's sake. Look, I'll just be a minute. Go ask the guy if we're headed in the right direction, okay? I shook my head. So she pressed her arm within the grasp, made a face at me, and wandered off toward the figure. I watched her go, and as she and the figure faded slowly from my view, I waited for 10 minutes, then went home. When I got home, I told my parents that Leslie and I had gotten separated, and a search team was called. I wasn't entirely sure whether I should mention the figure we'd seen. Hard to make out by both of us, but differing, with such differing behaviors. If I told the police when they came to interview me, I doubt they took me seriously. But with the fact that I had a bad experience before, and probably concluded that I had a hallucination of some sort. After all, a lot of people go up, but not everyone comes down. It's a sad and unfortunate truth. But now looking back, I'm not so sure it's as simple as that. Of course accidents happen, but I can't help but remember those 3 incidents. The same pricking of hairs against my shirt. The same feeling of the mist pressing in around me. The same nagging that something wasn't quite right. You see, the figure was two things at once. From my perspective, I saw a lost tourist, some poor bugger that had strayed from the path,
and not gotten back until getting completely disoriented. Leslie claimed to have seen someone who was sure of themselves. Someone to ask for help. We both saw something that we were attracted to approach. I didn't. Leslie did. They never found Leslie. After that day, I never went walking there again. Now, I've moved away in my final year at the University, Aberdeen, glad to have moved on with my life. There have been times I've been out with mates at the pub and come across a group of tourists heading north. They often ask a few of us about the Highlands, and for any stories. Sometimes they even ask directly about mythical creatures, such as the Loch Ness Monster, or about the Fae, and I'll tell them my story. Normally they'll nod and listen politely enough, while my friends jeer away at me for trying to wind up the tourists, or being a bit soft in the head, believing in fairies and the like. But there are a few times after I laugh off the teasing, and I catch someone's eye, whether they be someone I share a mutual friend with but don't know well, or a quiet drinker at the bar listening to our conversation, someone who themselves have lived outside the cities, and we share just for a moment an understanding